Pastor Benny Hinn reached out to Stephen Strang for a podcast.
This is Stephen Strang, and welcome to the Strang Report podcast. My guest today is none other than Benny Hinn. He reached out to me recently about doing a podcast, and today you're going to want to stay tuned to my exclusive interview with Pastor Benny Hinn.
And in that podcast, there was a lot of discussion that was brought up, one of which was his current focus in life and ministry. And also, interestingly, he made mention of some things some persons might want to consider confession, talking about a time when he was pressured into giving fake prophecies. And also, he spoke about the prosperity gospel. Of course, this is not the first time he had actually came out to make confession about the prosperity gospel. But the question is this: why is he coming out this time? Considering the fact that he was the one that reached out to this Stephen Strang for this podcast. All right. So this is just part one of the video. There will be a part two. And maybe by then we'll be able to answer the question that is in people's mind. Why is he coming out with this podcast at this time? Let's see what he has to say.
Longevity is dancer. I've been in ministry now 50 years. It'll be 50 years this year. That's a long time to last. I think that should be a testimony by itself.
It is. In fact, that's my next question. You have been following Christ for decades. As you reflect back on those years, are there any regrets that you have?
Absolutely. I'm a human being. I've made mistakes. I remember Oral telling me he made mistakes by the truckloads. We all make mistakes. The two things I regret most in ministry: I was not too wise a number of times with prophecy. Number one, I had guests come to the crusades that I think brought harm to not only people's lives, but also to my reputation, because their prophecies were not really prophecy. They went outside the borders of redemption, because anything that's outside redemption is not prophecy. We know, of course, that prophecy is for edification, exhortation, and comfort, but it must be within redemption. And when people come who go beyond that, we should not allow that. And sadly, I allowed it, and then I stopped. But that was years ago when I stopped. And then there were times when I thought God had showed me something that he wasn't showing me, and I spoke it out. But in 1 Corinthians 13, we see very clearly that we all prophesy in part. That means we don't see the full picture. And sadly, and I wish I can go back and fix it, but sadly, there were some prophecies I gave that were not accurate or from the Lord. But who's perfect? And for that, of course, I ask people to forgive me. I'm just human and made mistakes like that. And I'll probably make them again, I suppose, down the road, because I'm not perfect. We will be perfect one day when we're with the Lord. As long as we're in this body that's imperfect, we're not going to make perfect decisions and even say the things we need to say or should say. But, it's sad when people focus on the times you missed it. But that's just, the way it is. Yet there were times when I did not miss it. And then the other one is prosperity. And that's been a very difficult one for me. When I started in ministry, it was simple. And then the ministry grew. I was invited to go to what they called praise-a-thons. And I think that's when my troubles began. I don't blame anyone. But sadly, you get kind of in a place that becomes difficult. You don't know what to do, and how to get out of it. So I came to the conclusion in 2019 that I did not want to be a part of the gimmickry of it. And I still stand by that. But sadly, I let pressure get to me. And because of that pressure, I said things and did things I should not have done. And for that, really, I am sorry. And I ask the dear people watching us to really forgive me for that. And I'm striving with all my heart to be as biblical as possible with that. And frankly, I'm kind of at the end of my road anyways. I don't see myself needing to do a whole lot of that down the road. But right now, my focus is the Lord, and only the Lord. And if, of course, there will be the time when I may have to raise funds for our ministry, I will do it as biblically as I know how, and balanced.
Can you explain that a little more?
I want that teaching to be about Jesus, and only Jesus and the gospel, because the heart of prosperity has to be the gospel, true biblical prosperity. And that is what I will do and strive to do for the rest of my life. That's it.
Now, getting back to what we were talking about a minute ago, I asked you about regrets. But let's suppose you could go back and give advice to an 18-year-old Benny Hinn about what you were going to expect later in life to avoid some of these regrets. And I believe that your advice would really apply to any 18-year-old just starting out in their adult life and whatever ministry God's called them to.
Well, I would say three things.
Now, while we wait for the part 2 of this podcast, okay, there are a lot of questions that might be in people's mind. One of them is this: why is it coming out with this podcast? Now, don't forget that not quite long, there were videos making around on YouTube or on social media that was suggesting prophecies of his death, okay? Even though some of these prophecies were coming from people that we don't consider prophets, all right? But however the case might be, our ends are fold and crossed, and we are waiting for the part 2. And maybe somehow we might be able to make sense by the time the whole episode of this podcast comes out. All right, so I don't want to know what you think about this video, right? And do you think this is also a call out to some of the persons we might consider as helpers of God, okay? Of course, if you have seen the trailer of Prophecies 2, you understand what I mean by helpers of God. Those who might, one way or the other, want to cajole people by faking prophecy and miracles in order to get people to believe and also get to donate in their ministry. I am hoping that somehow some persons might begin to take the line of Benny Hinn and begin to come out, make confessions and repent of some of the things which they did in the past that were not accurate. No matter how you see it, all right? So I do want to know again what you think about this video, right? Make sure to leave your comments on the comment section.